I'd like to thank you all for being here. I don't know if this is your lunch hour or what, but definitely I love to see students. I've been in Houston for 50 years or more, and I have had many, many students before, so I love students. And I just wish that you continue and finish your careers. That is the main thing, so you can make a good living. I also want to thank especially, of course, Dr. Juan Galvan for inviting me here, and Ms. Lillian Castillo-Hewlett, and Kelly Strader for dealing with me through all this process. And then I also want to recognize some of my great friends from Houston Community College, Dr. Jacqueline Gascon, who is also dean of the college, and then my husband, my daughter, Lorenzo Cano, Associate Director of Mexican Studies, Jahaira Smith, and then Blanca Rodriguez. And so we have worked many times before. Today you're going to hear many words in Nahuatl. Does anybody know what Nahuatl is? Extra points? You know? What is? Tell us. I love this to be interactive, not just for me to lecture, but just to see what you know. Could you please tell us what is Nahuatl? What? It's a language, and it's a language that's spoken by almost 1.5 million people today. Even here in the United States, you have people who speak Nahuatl. Now, the Mexican population is about 159 million people. So the people who speak Nahuatl, and there are many other indigenous languages that they speak, are about 10% of the population. So Nahuatl was the culture, was the language spoken by the great civilization of the Aztecs, which by the 15th century was flourishing as much as any other civilization in the world, such as the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans. So when we're talking about the Aztecs, we're talking about a highly civilized people with tall buildings, engineers, architects, poets, writers, and a complex system. Very complex system of militarism, just like you see today. We have a lot of military powers in the world today. So same thing. They were very militaristic at that time, and but they left a great culture. Now, when the Spanish came, which was in the late 14th century, and conquered Tenochtitlan, which was the major city in 1521, the missionaries, they wanted to convert the indigenous people to Catholicism. So before they did that, they had to learn the language. And the major language at that time was Nahuatl. So they interviewed the elderly, they translated some other books, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about these Aztec roots of the Day of the Dead, which is the major topic today, and how do we know that we had these roots? I mean, that this knowledge is true. Okay, so today we are going to talk about these ancient roots of the Day of the Dead. Here's my assistant right here. The places where the deceased go, this is very original to Aztec philosophical thought. That's why we're going to talk about it today, a little briefly. Celebrations of the death of children and the death of adults, and also the syncretism between the Christianity that was brought here and also the native religious system. And then today, we come to the modern celebration. So you're going to see what did the Spanish bring to today's celebration and what was there. Okay, so the concept of death and the afterlife, where do we get that? Well, the Amoxtli, that's the name for books, Nahuatl, that's our first Nahuatl word. They were the indigenous books. So there were libraries, many of them which were burned by the Spanish, but there was a lot of knowledge written there. And these books were written on the bark of trees, and also on the bark of tree, and also on the on deer skin. All right, so the Spanish interviewed some of these elderly, some of these very smart people, and they created codices. Now, one of the codices means books. So one of the famous books where all this information is coming from is the Codex Florentino, which got that name because these books were sent to Florence, and that's where they were kept. And so there's 18 books which talk about the Aztecs, their lives, their beliefs, their celebrations. So some of this knowledge comes from there. And you can it's digitized. So you can actually get it and flip the pages and everything. It's just incredible what computers are doing today. You can also get this knowledge from artifacts, excavations, museums that were left over there, and also from oral traditions. Oral traditions are stories that are passed down from generations to generations. So some of these traditions have been changed greatly, but some of them still remain the same. All right, so this is a copy of an amoxtli, of a page from an amoxtli, and there we have one of the greatest people, which I consider the Leonardo da Vinci of ancient Mexico. And it's Nezahualcóyotl, coyote, coyote. All right, we also have Nahuatl languages in English, believe it or not. And so his name meant the fasting coyote. He was a scholar, philosopher, warrior, architect, engineer, poet, and ruler. Nezahualcóyotl. Can you repeat that? Nezahualcóyotl. That's your second word. All right, and he was a poet. So some of these poets were recaptured by a famous Mexican historian, Luis La Portilla, and he was also an archaeologist. So I'm going to read this poem. I have the Spanish translation in case anybody wants to read it. As a painting, we will disappear. As a flower, we will dry up. Here on earth, just like the feathers of the saguan bird, we will waste. We will go to his house. So here, it's a very deep philosophical poem here that has to do with the idea that we go someplace after we die. All right, so the name for soul is tonali. I hope you're writing this, because there's going to be an award afterwards, whoever can take the test and pass it. There's no test. But anyway, the soul, this is very, very original from Aztec religious thought and philosophical thought. Where does the soul go after death? Okay, for the Aztecs, there were 4 places where the soul went. Number 1, to the sun. And the souls of warriors and mothers who die giving birth would have this very prestigious death. To the underworld, this is the majority of people who died because of many causes, would go to the underworld. To the water paradise, this was a wonderful place of water and fertility, which is the place of Tlaloc, the god of rain, and Xachihuitlicue, the goddess of rain. And so anybody who had a death related to water would go to this place. To the tree of life, if you died as an infant, then you will go to this tree of life. And this is what we're going to cover briefly here, these 4 places where the soul would go. Okay, so the house of the sun, Tonatiuh, is another, your 5th Nahuatl word, that means the sun. Can means place, the house of the sun. The souls of warriors and mothers who died at birth would travel with the sun, Huitzilopochtli, which was the major Aztec god, Mexica god, in its daily movement, and after 4 years, they would come back as butterflies or hummingbirds. So all of these beautiful butterflies that you see around and hummingbirds, these are the soul of warriors and the soul of mothers who died at birth. Chikuniclan, the land of the dead. This is the place where most of people who died of whatever causes that were not related to the sun or to war or to water, they had to go to a long 4-year journey to the underworld. And the family performed rituals and prepared foods to accompany the deceased for 4 years. And this is where we see one of the roots of the traditions today, where people go to the cemeteries and they serve food for the dead people, for their deceased relatives. All right, so the dead had to go through different levels until at its end the soul would meet the goddess of death. This is a little similar to Dante's Inferno. Has anybody read Dante's Inferno? You have? Okay. Where he talks about all these levels of, but it's a little different too. But it's the same idea that there are layers in the underworld where you go to. Okay, so we're going to kind of go very fast through these 9 levels. So the first level, the interesting thing is that you would go with the dog, with your pet. The pet would help the soul go through this very difficult journey. And the name for dog is Iscuitle. Well, of course, I have a Spanish pronunciation in my Nahuatl, but Iscuitle. And solo Iscuitle is that dog that accompanies you. The second level is where the mountains meet. The third level is the Obsidian Mountain, and I'm beginning to think this is a volcano, because inside volcanoes you find a lot of obsidian rock. The next level is the place of winds. And this is a painting that depicting the underworld, kind of scary. We're still there. The fifth level is where the banners float, and I'm not very sure about what all this means, because it's complex and it's not very well explained by the Spanish either. The place where arrows are thrown to you, and then where the heart is eaten. And finally, when you go through the clouds, and then you finally get to Chignahuapan, which is the place of the 9 rivers. And this is where you meet the god and goddess of death, Mixteca Cihuatl and Mixteca Tecutli. Tecutli means male, sir. Cihuatl means girl, female. Mixteca, I guess, means death. All right, so from the codices, you have a picture of Mixteca Cihuatl, and you have a picture of Mixteca or Mictlan Tecutli. Mictlan is also a word for no, it's not an inferno, it's an underworld. All right, then we go to a wonderful place, Tlalocan. It's the place, the water paradise of plants and fertility. And this is a place where there's always rain, not tornadoes or anything like that, just nice rain, water, plenty of water, fruits, vegetables, place of fertility. And so if you had a water-related death, such as drowning in lakes, rivers, or choking in your own saliva, or anything related to death, to water, like water in your lungs because of COVID, then you will go to this place. And interesting, Tlalocan, it comes from the word Tlaloc, which means rain. You have the Tlaloc, one of the major gods, with its consort, Mictlatecutli. Now, if you go to Teotihuacan, how many of you have been to Teotihuacan? Raise your hands. Wonderful place for you guys to travel. When everybody goes there to see the huge pyramid of the sun and the huge pyramid of the moon, but they miss the mural. And that mural is still there, believe it or not. It's very fainted because it's been there for many, many years. But there, this is a kind of like a reproduction of the mural. And there you see at the center the goddess Chalchihuitlicue, and with the tree of life. And then you see there her priestesses. And they are all growing vegetables and fruits and things. So you want to go to Tlalocan. That's a great place for your soul to go. And then if you die at birth, or as an infant, then you will go to the tree with breasts. Now, this tree is very interesting because it's actually a tree that exists in Africa, and it also exists in the rainy areas, Mesoamerica. And it has pouches, and these pouches actually have milk, so vegetable milk, like soya milk. This tree, I looked for the name of it, and of course it's a Latin name, so I don't remember very well. But some people actually use this milk to give to their babies. And so if you died at birth or very young as an infant, you will go to this place. Okay, so these are the 4 places. And so now we're moving towards today. But before we do that, I wanted to show you the calendar. This is not a calendar, actually. This is a stone which has very interesting marks there that have to do with the lunar calendar, which was the ritual calendar. It was 260 days, and it had 13 months, and it's about 260 days, like I said. And then they also had the solar calendar, which is very similar to our Gregorian calendar. It has 18 months and 20 days. And so I'm just bringing this to you, not only to show you the beautiful stone, but also to show you that these people organize their lives and ceremonies according to the months of the year. So Bikailwitontli is the 8th month of the Aztec year, and it was the whole month, we said 20 days, was used to celebrate the death of children. Okay? So here we only have 1 day, the Spanish only had 1 day, they had a whole month of celebration, rituals, dances, human sacrifices. And then we had also the 7th month was to celebrate the death of the elderly. And so here we also have some of the roots of what we're doing today. All right, so now we go to the Spanish influences. Now it is very interesting that the Spanish have celebrated the day of children's death on November the 1st and the date of the adult's death on November the 2nd. And this is a tradition that goes back to the 8th and 9th centuries. And they brought it with them. And so they also had the tradition of cleaning the graves, covering them with flowers and candles, and the family members would bring wine and pan de animas, which is bread, to the graves as well. So we can say that the Day of the Dead has a lot of these roots, because that's what we do here. Cleaning cemeteries and building altars at home or in the graveyards. So now these 2 traditions kind of mixed, and since the 16th century, and now we come to what we have today, the modern celebrations of the Day of the Dead. Now, this is one of the most important festivities celebrated in Mexico, Canada, and the United States by people of Mexican descent. So we're going to go over what is it, what does the celebration consist of. Now, right now in Mexico, they are probably beginning with all this, all of these the different traditions that they have, because they take some time to do this. In Mexico, the city San Andres Mixquic is one of the several original neighborhoods of Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan is basically at the center, at the heart, where the Templo Mayor of Mexico City is. How many of you have gone to Mexico City? Yay! Have you seen the Templo Mayor? Okay, so you are in Tenochtitlan. That's where Tenochtitlan was. So it attracts thousands. This has become very commercial. And so there's visitors that stimulate all the business around, and people are selling calaveras, they're selling all kinds of little skeletons, all kinds of stuff, probably made in China, to celebrate it, to help celebrate it, costumes. This is not Halloween. This is very different from Halloween. That's a totally different tradition. Xochimilco is the place of the flowers. It is still there. It's a place where chinampas are still grown there. And chinampas are layers of dirt which are placed on the lake so that you can grow things from it. Because the ancient Tenochtitlan was a lot of lakes and was like an island in between all these lakes. So they needed to produce food, and they created these chinampas. And so marigold has become the flower, the traditional flower. And so here we have festivals going all around Mexico where people dress as calaveras, and they spend a lot of time making beautiful costumes, and then they go around and compete. There are competitions. And then here is how each different area celebrates it differently. So now we have offerings, we have pantheons that have become festivals. Here we have the Dance of the Devils. This is in a place where there is 40% of the people are Nahuatl. And there's also all kinds of foods that are made for this occasion. And then in Campeche, this is kind of interesting. There's bone washing. So you take actually the skeletons from the graves and you wash them and put them back. So kind of like a strange tradition, right? So, okay, so then in Sonora, you have altars, and for 2 consecutive months, which is interesting because this goes back to the 2 consecutive months where they were celebrated in the past. And so these are pictures of a friend of mine, Dr. Mary Helen Perez. She attended almost every place in Mexico taking pictures. Those are the caravans, the floats, and it's a big celebration. And like I said, the cemeteries. Now, this is important. There are 4 elements that are important in every altar if you want to build your own. You need water, okay, in the form maybe of a glass with water or in any other form. You need earth, sand is usually used. You need fire, so there's candles that you use there, and then wind. Now, the wind is the moving objects. It's basically papel picado, which is the paper that they cut, and so they hang it and they move, and so that gives the sensation of the 4 basic elements: water, earth, fire, and wind. And then mums are the flowers for its color and its particular fragrance. If you get a chance to get some mums, smell them, and maybe they will remind you of death somehow. Skulls, calavera figurines, bread of the dead. You can buy some of this in Houston. How many of you had bread of the dead? Yeah, they make very beautiful skeletons and things. Pictures and items of the dead person. Let's say the person was a soldier, and you could put, some of the weapons or whatever, some of the friends or whatever, airplanes on the altar. Incense, definitely, to create a mood. And the papel picado is that cut-out paper, which is very beautiful, and it's a skill. And then, of course, here's the figure of the dog. Does anybody remember how you say dog in Nahuatl? Lorenzo? Escuintle. Very good, Lorenzo. You get the extra points. And then salt for the purification of the soul. And here's some of the mums. Cempasúchil, the flower, is very good. It's a good flower. It's a good plant too, because if you have hiccups, you can just make a tea out of it, and maybe you will cure. So this is another picture of how people clean the graves, and they make them very beautiful. And we have a friend who actually celebrates the Dead of the Dead right here in one of our cemeteries here. What is the name of the cemetery?
I think there's several. There's one in 2nd Ward.
In 2nd Ward, and he brings people from Mexico and everything. Yes. And so it is celebrated in Houston. If you kind of pay attention, you'll find many celebrations, like at Mecca. They also have all kinds of calaveras and all kinds of things there. Okay, so the skull has been something very traditional in Mexican society. The Zompantli, it's right there at the center of Mexico. at the Templo Mayor. And in pre-Columbian times, skulls and skeletons were symbols found in painting and pottery. The symbolism means the rebirth into the next stage of life. All right, so this is a picture taken by my son of the skull rack of the Templo Mayor. These are actually real skulls, by the way. We're almost through. All right, so here is one example of a ceramic from Tehuacan showing death or the skeleton. And then we come to cultural traditions. This is Jose Guadalupe Posada was a great a person who a great artist, and he was also a printer. He printed things, and he created this figure that is now memorialized as La Catrina, or La Calavera Garbancera. And Garbancera is a nickname for an indigenous American who tries to look European and denies its own heritage. So that's why you have that very fancy Parisian-looking hat. And Katrina hides her Mexican origins by wearing a French hat. And it was a political commentary. So he would publish these things in his newspapers, and there was always satire involved. In other words, to make people kind of laugh, but also realize that we're all the same, we're all equal. Why? Can anybody figure why we're all equal? One of the reasons? We all die. Very good. You get the extra points. All right. So Porfirio Diaz and many other presidents in South America, they were just obsessed, and they still are, with European ways. And they try to modernize Mexico and change the native costumes. And this is La Catrina Garbancera, which I'm sure you have seen it everywhere. And then another tradition is the literary calaveras. The literary calaveras, which he started, are satirical poems that critique or make fun of political figures or others, and some are printed in newspapers. Their purpose is, just like I told you, to remind everybody that you're going to die eventually. So this is a calavera written by my husband yesterday under the gun right here. La Flaca, I call it La Flaca, the skinny one. Aren't you happy with your new body? You finally lost the extra weight. And now nothing bothers you, not anybody. Relax as you enter the pearly gates. Okay, can anybody interpret that? What does that mean? Can you interpret it?
You've lost the weight, but it doesn't necessarily matter because you're going to die.
The pearly gates is actually paradise, somebody told me yesterday, right? The gates of eternity. Very good. Okay, conclusions. The indigenous people believed in helping their ancestors' soul reach their destination, a process which usually took time, in some cases 4 years. For this reason, they offer foods and drinks to them. The Spanish brought with them the tradition of cleaning the cemeteries and bringing food to the day on the assigned date of the dead in November the 1st and November the 2nd. Now, in 2008, UNESCO declared the Day of the Dead as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So before we leave, would you like to read it, Jaira? No. Okay, my daughter, when she was 6 years old, she wrote this beautiful poem, and I have memorialized it by putting it in this presentation, and now it's going to be on the internet and all over the world. The shadow of darkness, so mysterious and strange, the end has come is a fact you cannot change. 1,000 heartbeats in the time of one, the light has gone and sorrow has begun. 12 black roses drying on the earth, the new life of sorrow has taken its birth. The shadow like a crowd creeping by, but the game of horror never passes a try. Crow, I meant. And what do we have to remember all this? Not even a goodbye, but a silent dismiss. And this had to do with the fact that I ran over my dog. All right, well, this is it. Thank you. Any questions? I think we have 5 minutes, right? Any questions?
Okay,
Okay, so I do have a question. It's about the afterlife, about something about rain or something like that, where like if they die or drown or something like that. So I was just wondering if like the Aztecs would drown themselves to get to the afterlife, since it does sound beautiful the way you described it.
I cannot answer you that question because I don't know. But there were floodings over there, and the people, there were a lot of lakes. So I'm sure people died, through that process. Yes.
Hello.
Yes. But I don't think people would commit suicide unless, some people may have committed suicide. Now remember at that time people did not live that long either, maybe 30, 35 years, but there were drownings, definitely. Hello? Hello? Okay. Okay, any other comments?
let me get to you.
You said something about, you referenced that the Day of the Dead had become much more commercialized. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean that people are making money because people are selling on the streets. They're selling dresses, they're selling costumes, they're selling skeletons. They're taking this opportunity to make a living. There's a lot of poor people there, and there's also a lot of rich people that also exploit this business. It's like a big, big celebration. So it becomes commercialized. And so some people forget, especially the tourists, they think this is a big party and then you're drinking and whatever, and then you may die right there. but it has both things, it has the ritual, the families feeling kind of sad or happy too, because death is celebrated both ways, as a happy occasion and also as a revival of the person, remembrance of the person, like you saw in the Coco film, right? How many of you saw Coco? Yeah. And so, but there's also a lot of commercialism, like everything else. Yes, thank you. Huh?
Sort of like the piñata.
The piñatas?
Yeah, the piñata tradition.
The piñata tradition, here's our expert right here at the back of you. He just gave a presentation last week.
Yeah, well, the video is now on YouTube. But yeah, piñatas also have a syncretic origins, Aztec and European. And yeah, we had a presentation about that. So yeah, I was also looking at some similarities. Thank you.
When you were talking about the dog, is it that dogs have more significant cultural importance than other animals, or is it just dogs?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. Why was the dog preferred? And to tell you the truth, I don't know. I don't know. Anybody has an idea?
Maybe it could be because they're more loyal.
Maybe. Well, cats are also nice, but chickens. But I know that this is a very important question that you asked. The dog, I have seen some ceramics where there's a woman breastfeeding a dog and breastfeeding a child at the same time. And also I know about the very famous dogs in Mexico that did not have any hair. You can still see them, they're grown over there, especially because they have become extinct. But the Spanish used to eat them. It's supposed to be a delicacy. It sounds like Trump saying, we're eating our dogs. No. Yeah, but that's a very good question. Why the dog? I need to ask the spirits, the ancestral spirits about that question. Yes. Yeah, well, we would have to go to that place and see if they're still practiced, the cleaning of the bones. But that's what the sources are saying, that in that place, that's one of the practices. They open the tombs and clean the bones, That kind of makes a little sense because the bones will be preserved for longer, right? You don't have all these spiders and all these other animals eating them. How many of you would like your bones to be clean after you die? Clean mine.
I want to comment something about the washing of the bones. Anecdotal, but I know this also is practiced in Guanajuato, Mexico. My grandfather, who passed away when I was 15, I'm 56, so that was 41 years ago. He passed away 41 years ago, and I think it was on the 10th anniversary, 10 years later, that the cemetery was going to get rid of them because they are not selling the tombs in perpetuity. You have to retrieve the bones and do something with them. And so my family retrieved them and washed them, and then I think they paid for another 10 years so they could deposit them again. But it's a custom that is still practiced in Guanajuato today.
See, very interesting. You girls had very interesting questions. Very interesting questions.
Well, thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gómez-Cano.